made to the City Council. So just a little bit of background. A lot of this information has been previously provided at previous work sessions, but recreational marijuana, specifically licensing related to the growing, processing, and sale of marijuana, is regulated by a revised Code of Washington, or RCW 69.50.331, and regulated by the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board. As part of those regulations, there is a standard 1,000-foot buffer between marijuana facilities and uses such as schools, parks, and childcare centers. There is a provision within the RCW that allows for cities to reduce that standard 1,000-foot buffer down to a minimum of 100 feet. And cities are also able to implement additional regulations or additional protected uses from marijuana facilities. As of now, 1444.097 has adopted the standard 1,000-foot buffers between all protected uses and all marijuana facilities. So as far as this one came into the city as a citizen-initiated code amendment, it has actually changed just over the course of about the last 10 days based on some feedback from the applicant. But originally, the way that it was discussed and originally proposed was to reduce the buffer between marijuana processing facilities and childcare centers to 225 feet. If certain conditions were met, the most prominent being that if the shortest distance via public right-of-way remained at least 1,000 feet. Kind of when this was first submitted, it was based on the assumption that family daycare providers, so in-home kind of in-residence daycares, were subject to that 1,000-foot buffer, which we'll get into on the next slide, that there was a little bit of a change in that interpretation. And so, as I mentioned, we had a number of work sessions with the Planning Commission as well as a work session with the City Council. There were some concerns expressed about odors and the general proximity to uses, including child care centers that would have children there. And so staff had recommended modifying the amendment to include a 30,000 square foot citywide limit on processing facilities. There's no current limit on processing facilities in the municipal code. And we also proposed some kind of minor amendments to clarify that this applied to standalone processing facilities, so that no grow component, no production component is allowed within these processing facilities if they would be eligible for that reduction down to 225 feet. As I mentioned, we learned last week from the applicant that they had gotten some additional information from the state. They had resubmitted their license to the Liquor and Cannabis Board, and it was determined that family daycare providers are not subject to that 1,000-foot buffer, so their license was approved by the state. So they no longer needed that reduction down to 225 feet. And they're fully vested as far as their land use application. They were required to get an administrative conditional use permit for their proposed processing facility. And so there was no need for the code amendment, but the applicant's representative and the applicant felt that it was important to clarify and differentiate between child care centers, which are kind of more commercial or early childhood learning centers that you find more traditionally in commercial areas or mixed use areas or industrial areas, as opposed to in-home daycares. They wanted to make sure that we differentiated between those larger child care centers and the in-home daycares. And so that has resulted in a revised code amendment proposal, which is included in attachment 2 of your packet. And that includes some revisions to 14.44.097, as well as 14.08.010, which is the definitions section of the land use code. And so kind of based on some of the feedback that we had received during the work session, we know that there were some concerns expressed based when there was the assumption that this buffer applied to in-home daycares. And so we wanted to offer some optional language to the Planning Commission if they choose to go down that road as far as some potential amendments that could be made to provide a buffer protection for those in-home daycares. As I previously mentioned, those do not currently exist because they are not defined as childcare centers under state law. Um, and so, for example, the city could adopt a buffer between marijuana facilities and family daycare providers, as well as other uses. And if you'll note in your packet, there is an attachment 3, which includes a number of optional amendments that are based on these previous discussions that we had. They include a new buffer that applies to family daycare providers with a potential reduction for processing facilities. So the way that it's proposed now is that there would be 1,000-foot buffer between most uses and marijuana facilities. Sorry, between family daycare providers and marijuana facilities, and that buffer could be reduced down to 200 feet specifically for processing facilities. And we also included the optional language related to implementing a 30,000 square foot limit on marijuana processing facilities with a sunset date of December 31st, 2023. As we previously discussed, that would give the city an opportunity to look to see how many of these types of processing facilities came into the city, provided a natural date as far as basically would give the city a couple of years to evaluate it, provide a natural sunset date for that, at which time that limit or that cap on processing facilities would go away unless otherwise amended by the city council via ordinance. So just to provide a little bit of additional information related to existing marijuana businesses, this was some information that had been requested by a couple of commissioners. These were maps. This specific map is an update of a lot of the mapping that was done back in 2013 and 2014 when the city was first developing its regulations. But if you look at this map, the areas kind of shaded different colors of blue. This is our light industrial area, and this is our general industrial area. So these are the only zones where marijuana facilities are permitted. The yellow areas are existing marijuana businesses that are licensed in the city. And then this green area shows buffers for protected uses. So schools, childcare centers, parks. So you'll notice that that doesn't actually extend and touch any, it doesn't affect any of the marijuana facilities as it shouldn't, or else they wouldn't have been permitted. And so moving on to the next slide, we did a little bit of research, looked through some business license data. Sorry for the resolution on this one. I did a screen capture and it didn't work very well, but this basically shows based on the business license data that we have, this little red or pink dot up here was the only in-home daycare that we had business license for. There could be others that maybe aren't licensed through the city, but you'll notice this kind of darker green radius would be a 200-foot buffer, and then this lighter green radius would be 1,000-foot buffer. So if there was a 1,000-foot buffer between this in-home daycare kind of in the northeast part of the city, it would extend into the general industrial zone where marijuana facilities are permitted. So it could potentially have an impact. If it was a shorter distance of 200 feet, it wouldn't reach. If there were an in-home daycare kind of right along the eastern edge of that residential subdivision, kind of any buffer would reach into the industrial area. But as of now, that wouldn't have an impact on any existing uses. We just wanted to provide some context as far as what that potentially could look like. And we're happy to do some additional research if there are questions from commissioners. So kind of moving forward, and as far as a staff recommendation, as noted in the staff report, the code amendment, either with or without the optional amendments in attachment 3, meets the approval criteria for land use code amendments, which is found in 14.16c.075, basically compliance with the comprehensive plan, compliance with the Growth Management Act, and basically in fulfillment of the general public health and safety of Lake Stevens. As noted in the staff report, all of the SEPA and public noticing requirements for type 6 applications were met. We did not receive any public comments on the SEPA determination of non-significance. And so staff is recommending tonight that Commission forward a recommendation to City Council to amend the municipal code per attachment 2. But as noted, the Commission, we also offered some potential optional amendments in attachment 3 if commissioners are so inclined and would like to explore those opportunities. Those are shown in attachment 3 that we would welcome and be willing to answer any questions from commissioners related to those optional amendments. I would note that if the Commission does want to include any of those optional amendments, because they would result in additional regulations that aren't currently in the municipal code, staff would recommend continuing the public hearing to May 19th to allow for some additional public comment. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Planning Manager Levitan. With that, it's now it's on to the commissioners. So any commissioner comments? You know what? I'll actually start. I can start with as far as the commissioner comments and get my stuff. So with this whole the marijuana kind of this whole topic, it's had a totally different feel for me. As far as just we've had 2 meetings a month, and it seems like it's been pulled and added and pulled. So it had me just look a lot more into it. And I get that with you know, there's a lot of contingencies and variables and behind the scenes stuff. But I do think that you know, there are, as far as the picture presented, I think there's a lot of information that, you know, is important as far as people, you know, making their determination on you know, which direction to go with it. So anyway, I'm gonna keep mine short and give other people a time to talk on it. And I also don't want to, I'm by no means insinuating anything. I just would like to go through how this deal got put together, A, and then B, you know, the potential for what could happen, you know, and why I think that cap could be important for the city. So anyway, I know I could be doing this better, but these are the subject lots that we are speaking about. There's a contingent, and in 2018, and sorry, I wish I had something better, but in 2018, these were all owned by the same person. And then in 2018, the city of Lake Stevens bought this property for $761,000. And then fast forward to 2020, the subject property that has been the topic of all of our conversation was bought, I believe, for $250,000. And again, that's not, we don't have enough information to say that that's, you know, anything bad happened there, but it is important as far as just with how much of a topic this has been for the first, you know, point of our 2021 with everything else going on. But anyway, then as far as the caps, you can see that, you know, this is the subject property, and it doesn't take much to realize that whatever happens here is likely going to happen throughout the rest of these properties, which again, I'm not saying, you know, I'm not against, I don't want to restrict anybody from the private property rights or anything like that, but it is something that I feel like the city has never shown us this map, or really shown, because, you know, that automatically goes to a 329,750 gross square footage allocation that could, you know, go towards those marijuana facilities. So I guess from my point of view, it's after speaking with a ton of, you know, people in the city that are on both sides of the aisle, I felt like there was a huge contingent of Lake Stevens residents that, you know, not only didn't know that this was going on, just didn't really know the magnitude of it. So I guess my concern with the city is at times I feel like they're, you know, providing more weight to the interests of a few rather than fully vetting, you know, the desires of the city. And again, I'll leave it at that. But I do, you know, it does concern me that just with how some of the information has been delivered and pushed around, it seems like there's a confirmation bias going on where the city kind of wants answers as opposed to you know, wants to dig through it with you know, and I understand the public hearing, this is all part of it, this is a part of getting all that information, but you know, realistically there's not you know, everybody's not on these calls. So I just wanted to express my concern that I do think that there's a, you know, that it's a bigger decision than just, you know, whether or not this one unit is exempt from that rule. And I know that that's now a moot point, but I feel like if I didn't say that after all the last meetings we had, it would have went washed down the wayside. So with that, I'll allow any other commissioners to provide their comments.
Oh, go ahead, Jen. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna, I appreciate our commission now more than, I don't want to say ever have, because I've appreciated our commission for a long time. But I think that we've done some really brave things in the past couple of weeks and months. And sadly, maybe not sadly for the applicant, but sadly, we've spent a lot of time coming to a point where we've got some big things going on in this city, you guys, big things. If you've watched any of the city council meetings, they're all on YouTube. Please go back in time. But there are some things that are going on that we are going to be facing, and that are going to rewrite our city and sort of rebrand our city for a long, long time. I wish that the concern and I will dare say advocacy for this industry was universal. As a small business owner, I wish it was universal. I wish that everything that was being done in our city that could benefit true employment and really, I think, some healthy growth would be as brought forth as this has been. But I'm curious to see what the comments will be tonight, both from any citizens that want to weigh in and from our commissioners, because I respect you, and I've really appreciated the dialogue that has happened up until we are at this point prior to public comment tonight on a topic that has had some history. So the city's interpretation is one, ours is another. Certainly, city council can do what they choose to do, but I'm curious to see where this will take us. But I appreciate everybody's due diligence in bringing us to this point. Thanks.
And Chair Cronin, if I could just note that the applicant's representative is on the call this evening as well, if he would like to provide any testimony as well, or if you'd have any questions of the applicant.
Yeah, I was going to let some commissioners talk, and obviously, if any commissioner has a direct question for the applicant, I was going to let the applicant speak next. But if anybody has a direct question, or if Mr. Toyer or Ms. Anderson, I didn't see who was on the call, would like to jump in, I'm okay with that as well. But well, actually, first, I guess let me just take control of the meeting. Let me not leave it open-ended like that. But are there any other commissioners that have either a direct question for the applicant to respond to, or any other items on the topic?
I got a quick question for Planner Leviton. So with this adjustment of what a child care facility is, according to the Liquor Canister Control Board, so now the entire proposal is kind of cloudy now. So are we still looking at a buffer change?
So as is kind of recommended by staff in attachment 2, we are not looking at a buffer change. And that was based on that this was a citizen initiated code amendment, and that they then requested for the scope of that code amendment to be modified because it essentially became a moot point as it related to family daycare providers. It didn't have an impact on either their business or really the industrial area at large, because the area to the west of the Hartford industrial area is largely residential. Really only in-home daycare providers would have an impact on that area. There aren't any other protected uses that extend a 1,000-foot buffer into it. So there is no proposed buffer change in attachment 2, which is what was requested from the applicant.
I wanted to verify so people are listening. This is what we're not even discussing the buffer anymore.
Well, so yeah, we did include a potential additional buffer for family daycare providers, which the Planning Commission would have the option to make as part of their recommendation to City Council to implement essentially a new buffer on family daycare providers. We did confirm with the state that we are able to do that. You are able to have additional regulations, additional protected uses adopted through local ordinance. So that's something that the Planning Commission would do, but it essentially would result, as opposed to what would have originally been considered a reduced, kind of a more lenient buffer. It's now an additional buffer that doesn't currently exist based on the new interpretation that family daycare providers are not protected uses under current state law.
So if we don't put this 200-foot buffer or 1,000-foot buffer, if we don't put the buffer in, there is no buffer between those type of businesses and these businesses.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cronin, is it okay if I weigh in? So I think that it's clear that the substantive issue was kind of mooted by the lack of specificity around the term childcare center in our municipal code. So I am in favor of staff's recommendation of parsing that out and clarifying it in the code, in our code, so that it mirrors the RCW definitions of childcare center and then family daycare provider. But I would also, my preference would be to go ahead and continue the public hearing to, is it May 19th? So that we can talk about those, the potential amendments that we could, for recommendation to council about for buffers, like Commissioner Welch was just discussing. I think it's a good idea to clean up our code so that it's consistent with the RCW in terms of those defined terms. But I still think the substantive issue is on the table as a community, even though it's not on the table technically anymore because of the way our code is written. Does that make sense? That would be my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Does any other commissioner have any other comments before I allow the proponent a chance to speak?
I have another real quick for either Russ or Dave. When it comes to these, I don't know if you can hear what's going on in my app. When it comes to defining the child care facilities, is within the marijuana ordinance the proper place to do it, or should be in part of our land use or other use codes that we have in the city? Or is this already is this the best place to put that type of information, since we have other codes for how land is used and what businesses are and all the categories? Is this the proper place to put that definition?
So we're proposing to amend it 1408.010, which is the definition section, which seems to be the most logical place to put it. But we also wanted to basically kind of strengthen that definition and kind of very much clarify where and to which types of facilities these buffers would apply. So we proposed also just having some additional language within 44.097 as well. But the main change, the primary change would be in 14.08.010, which is the definition section of the land use code.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. And I think I've given all the other commissioners a chance. So at this point, I'd like to move.
Wait a minute. Linda wants to ask a couple of questions.
Sorry, Commissioner Holt.
That's totally fine. So just to double check, there was no public comment from the daycare facility that is closest to the applicant, correct?
So I'm not quite sure which daycare facility that was based on the original request. And I would welcome Mr. Toyer, or if the applicant is available as well, to, if they had information about which site specifically that was. When we went through our business license, we actually didn't find one that was within 237 feet or whatever it was based on our search of business license data and home occupation permits. So I'm actually not quite sure which one that was. And basically what happened is when the applicant had originally submitted for their license with the state, their application was essentially denied or flagged based on the proximity of what was identified as a protected use. They then reapplied several months later, just relatively recently, and it didn't get flagged in their subsequent license application. And it was clarified that was because these in-home family daycare providers are not subject to the buffer. So I'm actually not entirely clear which facility it is, because I didn't see one that was that close to their proposed facility.
Okay, so basically we've gotten zero public comment from anybody that lives within 100 feet or 1,000 feet of this potential facility.
Yeah, so land use code amendments are treated differently because this is essentially, it applies citywide. It's not a project specific proposal. So it's not like where there's a 300-foot buffer for a conditional use permit where it goes out to everyone within 300 feet of the perimeter of that property. You know, we put it on kind of the land use application page on our city website. We have a long range planning page that is covering this amendment, the SEPA amendment, a couple of other long range planning projects. We issue the SEPA determination, but we don't send out notice citywide because that would be pretty extensive noticing.
Okay, so basically there could be a couple of family owned daycare facilities not that far from this potential processing facility that wouldn't even, if they don't pay attention to the Lake Stevens city website, they wouldn't know what was going on, correct?
That would be correct. And so we basically looked for the businesses that were there based on our business license data and our home occupation permit data, and weren't able to find any. You know, there aren't any current regulations. So we're not proposing any changes to our code that would negatively impact them. You know, the optional amendments we offer the Planning Commission in attachment 3 would actually provide additional protections that don't currently exist.
Which I would totally be in favor of, with like the 3,000 citywide limit on processing facilities. And I mean, I think that totally makes sense. And my last question would be, who is the applicant? Is it a LLC or is it a private person, or who is it?
Yeah, so it's an applicant, I believe it's called Joco Investments, LLC.
Joco Investments, LLC. Okay.
And I would like to add one additional point of clarification, Commissioner Holt. So through the code amendment process, we have not provided postcard notice, mailed notice as is appropriate for the type of application. However, when this application for this use came in, it did go through our land use process, which postcard notices were sent out at a different point for the actual land use, separate from this code amendment. And the land use was processed before this issue was ever flagged that there was even a potential protected facility in the vicinity of this. So the neighborhood has had notice.
Okay. Okay.
I had just one, oh, sorry, Commissioner Dewar.
I just wanted to mention I share in some of the concerns, particularly of Chair Cronin and Commissioner Huxford, about how this was handled throughout the process. You know, and one of the things that I want to make sure is stressed here is it's not that these requested modifications are for this business, though they would directly benefit by it, but all businesses that that share in this profession or trade. So, Chair Cronin, you had a map of one business, but potentially in the future, this could be several others in other locations. And I think we need to just be aware of that as we discuss this. So, yeah, I won't say too much more other than, we were asked to look at a buffer reduction that when we requested information from staff was shown to be substantially below what most of our neighbors were doing. And, again, is that the place we want to be as a city? So that's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Dorr.
I got a question real quick before we go to public comment. When it comes to section 1444097E, we were looking at 5 and 6 here. We have 5 that says licensed marijuana facilities, but then you go to 6 and then we got standalone processing. Do we really, what is changing this buffer? Because this changes it to 200 feet. What does that do comparatively to 5? Because if you're saying that the state, I don't understand what we're doing. I've been reading this section probably for the last day and a half, and I don't quite get it. I don't know what we're intending to do right now. I've kind of lost what our goal is here when it comes to the standalones here. And then 6 is kind of wordy because it says standalone, but then it says you can't have a retail and production. Well, if it's standalone, you wouldn't. It's kind of like a redundant statement in there, built in. It's a very weird written part to the code now. It just seems kind of an odd written code to me.
Yeah, so you're in the attachment 3, the 44097, and then E location, and then 5 and 6.
That's correct.
Yeah, so basically 5 essentially it's kind of is the blanket statement, kind of the umbrella statement that marijuana facilities require that 1,000-foot buffer, except for when they're within that 1,000 feet of a family daycare provider. And then if you go down to 6, it's basically kind of the next level down, and is that standalone marijuana processing facilities. So facilities that only do processing, they don't have a production component, they don't have a retail component. Anything with a production or a retail component would be subject to that 1,000-foot buffer. But if it's a standalone processing facility, it would be able to go down to 200 feet is the way that's intended to read.
It could be tightened up, though, that it's a more direct statement. I mean, it could say a standalone marijuana processing facility shall have a buffer of X if there's a number that the planning commission, would like to enact. It doesn't have to, it could be a more direct statement.
And then to Commissioner Welch's point is that's attachment 3 that we're speaking about, right? If that's not the attachment 2 that we're voting on, you guys are talking about attachment 3. If we decide
we now have 2 attachments. That's where I've been struggling with the last couple of days as I've been reading this. I'm like, what am I now having a public hearing on, and what am I voting on? I got 2 attachments to operate off of, and I don't know which. Am I supposed to put them together? Or I've gotten kind of confused. And maybe it's me confusing myself as I read, but it's just, I'm lost on what we're going here.
So I guess what we were trying to achieve, number one, we just gave you the basic code, which is what you see on page 12 of your packet. So those are the direct amendments that staff is proposing when we received this new information verified with liquor and cannabis, that what we're faced with now is really a definitional issue. And so if the planning commission is fine there, we can stop, we can clean it up. We wanted to go a step further based on the long conversation we've been having over the last few months. If the Planning Commission wants to go further, here's an option for you. So it's an add-on set of restrictions where before, as Planner Levitan was suggesting, we were looking at or proposing, the applicant was proposing a reduction that we had brought to the commission. Now this changes to, we would be proposing adding a buffer in a situation that we had been talking about previously. So it's just an optional component for your consideration. If you're happy just cleaning up the definitions, you can leave it there. But this is, again, why we also made the recommendation, if you want to consider some broader changes, including the cap and all of that, that you could bring it back for a further conversation.
And I would just note that I apologize for the confusion. The attachments weren't labeled. So attachment 2 is pages 12 through 14 of your packet. And that's why it looks like, page 12 and page 15 both start with 1444097. So I didn't append it. I didn't include attachment at the top of the document. So I apologize for the confusion on that. And I can understand how it was incredibly confusing that you read through it and then it seemed like you were reading through it again. But a different.
Trying to figure out if I had to. Yeah, obviously I have to pick up and place the E's and the F's in the right spot, and I guess I was having trouble with my reading Legos and trying to get it all together the way I should. So
yeah, so pages 12 through 14 are what staff has recommended based on the request from the applicant and the limited scope of the proposed changes. And then pages 15, starting on page 15, is that optional attachment 3, which includes a lot more track changes. It includes the addition of 1444097E5, which specifically deals with the implementing the new buffer for family daycare providers, and then allowing for a reduction from that standard buffer for marijuana processing facilities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all for that discussion. So I think we're done with the commissioner's question. So I'm going to actually pass it on and give the proponent an opportunity to speak if they'd like to. So if you're on the call, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Commissioner Cronin. David Toyer on behalf of the applicant, Joco Investments LLC. As you know, we had done a project in the city of Lake Stevens. We thought we were permitted and good to go, and we got a surprise from the state at one point that said, nope, sorry, you're within an area of a buffer protects and you can't operate there. And that was after the expenditure of a pretty significant amount of money into ordering equipment, purchasing equipment, starting construction, building out the actual insides of the building. And so, one of the options available to folks in the city of Lake Stevens, like every city around, is to propose a land use code amendment, citizen initiated. It's, I believe, a type 6 proposal in your community. So that is what we did, because there is no other way that we could ask for a variance or a deviation or some other interpretation in the city of Lake Stevens, because it was an issue, it appeared, with state law that said there was a 1,000-foot buffer unless the city says that it's less than that. So the only recourse we had to try to save the investment the client had made in the facility, based on the information we had at that time, was to apply for a land use code amendment to see if we could reduce the buffer in the city of Lake Stevens to allow the project to actually occupy that facility. We since resubmitted to the state because there were some other items that we needed to address with the state. The state came back and said, nope, you're good to go. Here's your certificate of location compliance. You're not within a protected buffer area of one of the protected or restricted entities. That kind of surprised us. We got to read in the definitions a little more carefully at the state level. And the state very clearly specifies now in their sections dealing with this issue that there's a difference between a child care center and a in-home care or in-home daycare facility. And so the issue for us, that in essence resolves the issue for us. However, I think that, looking at what happened with what went down with the state originally and what is in the existing city code, obviously, it would be nice to have city code be as clear as it could be and be consistent with the state as far as definitions are concerned. So you'll see a letter from us, last week where, we suggested that the city adopt some definitions that are consistent with the state. I can't really speak to the other stuff at this point in time. My focus on this was relative to my client's building. That's the other stuff is obviously the debate that you as a city have to have. I think that one way you could look at it is you could clean up your definitions and you have a pretty hefty work plan for the year, and potentially you work on some of these other things over a period of time and continue to try to address what may be some of the concerns of the community. Or staff said you can obviously continue the hearing and take a look at things additionally. As far as the rationale behind our specific amendment, nothing about this really impacts that building, that project. So that's kind of just what happened here in the last few weeks. So.
Thank you, Mr. Toyer. Well, with that, we're on to the comments from the audience. Commissioner Huxford, do you mind explaining? I'm new to the Zoom realm, and I want to make sure that anybody that does want to speak in the audience has the opportunity to. Do you mind giving a little lesson to them?
I'm happy to, and I would hope that the city would. So we can't see you. You perhaps can see us that have been let into this forum, but when it comes to being on Zoom and being the way that the city does this, I want to make sure that you have the ability to speak up. So Jenny, perhaps, I do this a lot, but it's not my place to school everybody. If there's anybody in the audience that wants to speak, Jenny, how would they do that?
I think just unmute themselves and ask Commissioner Cronin. There's 3 people in the audience, so he can call on each of them if he chooses.
Okay.
I think that sounds good. So if there's anybody in the audience that'd like to make any comment, please state your name and your address, and then I will allow you to speak.
Commissioner Cronin, I have a comment. My name is Ford Poston. I'm a resident of Lake Stevens. I've lived here for 10 plus years. I live at 1520 107th Ave Southeast. Anyway, my comment is basically this. It was interesting to hear some of the background here and some more of the detail. My main comment is that I would propose that the council not allow for any reduction in buffers or really any other changes to codes or rules that would promote or encourage the expansion of the commercial marijuana industry in Lake Stevens. And I give 2 reasons for that. My opinion is, number one, this just doesn't feel like it's in the character of Lake Stevens in general. I understand that there's already people that are growing and this business already exists here, and that's fine. That's their right if they meet the requirements, but I don't think we should be encouraging more of it. And the reason being is Lake Stevens is a great bedroom community. We're known for having a lake, great schools, a great football team. I just don't think this isn't fitting with any of our character. It's, and the bottom line is some people might disagree, but I think this industry in general it's unsavory to some degree. It's not federally legal. It's unbanked. It's got elements to it that just aren't settled out. And I think it just, at this point, I just don't think it really meets the needs of our community. I mean, there's no lack of access to, we have dispensaries, we have product that's being sold. This isn't really necessary to benefit the community in any way. So number one, just doesn't fit with the community. Number two, this is kind of my personal opinion. I think all of this investment is short-sighted. I think in general, back to the pot industry not being federally legal, at some point it probably will become federally legal. And when it does, the industry is going to consolidate. It's going to go from a bunch of bit players to very large corporate players. And all of this investment will be for naught, basically. I think, long-term, we should be focusing on Costco. We should be focusing on businesses that have long-term impact on this community and benefit the community in a positive way. I just feel like this is kind of a not in my backyard issue, and it's short-term. I don't think it's a longer-term benefit or economic impact to the community. So that's my two cents here.
Thank you, Ford.
I have a comment. My name's Matt Hardy. I've lived in Lake Stevens for a number of years, I guess it's about 25 or 28 years. I live at 1117 Stitch Road. And I would go and second what this gentleman just said, Ford Poston. I just don't think that this facility would really benefit our community at all. I hate to see all of the kids, high school kids and even middle schoolers that would walk by this facility and say, well, look, there's a pot processing center, and it just brings it closer to all these kids. I don't think we need to do that. Generally, when we see businesses like this, crime goes up, businesses go down. They don't want to be near it or around it. It drives property values down. And I think Clearview is a great example of this, where they have these same types of businesses, and no one wants to be around them. No one wants to open up their shop, whether it's a barber shop or a restaurant. They don't want to be near this stuff. And I just, when we moved here, we didn't really see Lake Stevens as a community that was going to be, centered around pot. Not that it's going to be centered around pot, but it just doesn't lend itself to our community and what we want from this community. And those are just my thoughts. I feel really bad that we would even entertain this thought.
Thank you, Matt. Are there any other guests in the audience that would like to make a comment?
Yeah, my name's Eric Turner. I live at 10701 15th Street. Lived here in Lake Stevens for about 10, 11 years or so. I'd echo the comments of the other two that spoke before, and hopefully you can hear me okay. You can't hear me?
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Hey, my name is Eric Turner. I've lived in Lake Stevens for a little bit over 10 years. I live at 10701 15th Street Southeast. I'd like to echo the two comments that were made before and maybe throw a little bit different view on this. I was reading through what the proposal said, and it had a provision in there for taking some of the money that would be made from this and putting it towards a single compliance officer. That seems woefully inadequate, given all the other changes that we see in our community and the other challenges with crime and other things. And then to bring this entity in and suggest that there's one person that we could add to the force to help enforce things, like that just doesn't feel like it's the right number. It should probably be significantly higher than that. And to the comments made before, I would encourage the council to do and provide a little bit of information to us as citizens around criminal escalation, criminal activity escalation or de-escalation in areas where this has happened before. As a citizen, I'd really like to understand that we've looked at those types of things, and if maybe a last point would be, I appreciate the effort to clarify the regulations in Lake Stevens, and think that that's absolutely something we should do. And as a citizen, I wouldn't mind if the regulation said 1,000 foot as the crow flies instead of 200 feet as the crow flies and 1,000 foot otherwise. We told my kids that were listening into this tonight, and they were befuddled as to why would be entertaining this as a community. So I don't think it's just the adults. It's my teenage children as well that have questions of why we would want this in our community. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Eric. I think that's all the guests, but I'll give, just in case I missed one, if anybody else would like to speak, the floor is yours. All right, thanks to all the guests for their input there. I know now it's time for the proponent rebuttal to the comments, but considering kind of where the public hearing has gone, I guess I'll give Mr. Toyer the opportunity, but am I right, Mr. Toyer, that I guess, do you have a response to any of that, or is that kind of off? It goes probably to your first comment.
I just to point out the fact, and staff had mentioned this earlier, the facility that my client has, it has already been approved by the city. It has its certificate from the state. Any changes don't impact it one way or another. So I just to clarify that for this specific instance. So
thank you for that. Without hearing anything else, I'm going to close the public comment, the comments portion of the hearing. I don't think I have to, oh yeah, I do have to, but so can I have a motion, or I'd like to make a motion to close the public comment. Can I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So now I think that we're just on to, we could close the meeting. I'll give any commissioners that would like to, well, actually, let's close the hearing by motion now. Sorry to do this if it's redundant. I'd like to close the hearing. Can I have a second?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for that. And then now it's time for the, as a commission, for us to make a motion. Does any, I personally, I agree with Commissioner Davis's interpretation of it. But I'll open the floor right now. Does anybody have a motion that they'd like to make that feel strongly about?
Can I, before we have a motion, can I make one last discussion comment?
Of course, thank you.
I just wanted to say, I know that this is kind of morphed into a larger conversation. The citizen proposed code amendment is moot now, and as Mr. Toyer pointed out, whatever we talk about, discuss in the future isn't really going to impact that particular property. But I just wanted to acknowledge how complicated the task that council has is in the sense of the economic development component of their work. And that's always been an ongoing, ever since I've been a planning commissioner, an ongoing issue. Everybody wants our community to be healthy in an economic development sense. And I certainly applaud the work that the council does for that. I do think that conversations that have been had at council have made it pretty clear that there is this conversation about cannabis and the industry there's a kind of expansive plan for what Hartford could look like with regard to cannabis. And the sunset provision that on the 30,000 square foot canopy that came before us in attachment 3 tonight is kind of and the reasoning behind it is kind of another arrow in that direction, that it looks like council's moving toward cannabis as the primary driver for that area. So my final comment on this is just that's a pretty huge topic for our community. If we're going to move in that direction, I think that we need, and the community will get the opportunity to comment on different proposals at the council level. But I think for me, this is why I suggested initially that we clean up our language in terms of the defined terms for child care center and family daycare provider, and then have the public hearing on these other potential amendments to discuss them. Because to me, it's not just about the buffers around child care centers. It's about this bigger idea, and these little pieces that we decide our recommendations at the planning commission, and then the council decides, they're all part of a larger picture. So I think the more that we can involve the community, and I loved our community members who came to speak tonight, the more we can involve people, the more we can generate conversation, the better. So yeah, that's my final comment for the evening on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. And I second that, where the city has a tough ball to juggle with budgets, and it's hard to make everybody happy. So I appreciate your work over there. Does any other commissioner have any comments before I make a motion?
Yeah, I would like to, I like the staff's addendum 2 to clear up the language. But a real quick question, the new processing facility, how large is that facility supposed to be? Like square foot?
I would call on our associate planner Gasaway to answer that question.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, how large is this processing facility that is going in? What square footage is it?
Oh goodness, give me 1 moment and I'll be able to pull that up. I actually just had the decision open. So the facility that was approved through an ACUP on September 15th, 2020, the square footage of the space going in is 15,240 square feet.
Okay. So with that facility being 15,000, right now we don't have the city does not have a limit on square footage of standalone processing facilities. We have a limit of 70,000 for production, which most of the production has processing also. But I was reading, I'm sorry, it's going to be kind of a few moments here. I've been reading some of our previous documents on planning, some of our BERT consulting documents that we got a couple years ago, where we discussed land use, we discussed all the usage. And if we want to limit an industry which is not going to produce very much tax revenue and not very many jobs, which is what we need in Lake Stevens, we are sorely missing commercial real estate, sorely missing it. We've got businesses leaving Lake Stevens because they have nowhere to operate. And we don't want it to be taken over by industries that, as I look at it as someone who's given recommendations to the council, that are going to produce tax revenue and jobs. That's what I look at. Then we should probably put a ceiling on square footage. If this was going to be 15,000, in Appendix 3, there is for location and size, there is a section F for 30,000 square foot. I would recommend when we do, and I can either amend whoever does the recommendation here in a second, should we put that limit at 16,000 square foot? That means this would be the only pure processing facility that could go in. If we put a 16, if I'm not wrong, somebody can correct me. If we put a 16,000 square foot, then you can't put another processing facility standalone in.
The thought is that would not take into account the existing facilities already in the city.
We have standalone processing.
There's one other standalone processor and it's fairly small. It's 1,000 square feet or less. So with the addition of this one, it would just be, even if you did 16,000, it still would become legal non-conforming to both of them. It just sets a ceiling that, commission could consider.
Yes, I mean, if we just set a ceiling, that would take up the existing and this current, and then we're kind of, that subject's closed then when it comes to expanding anything else.
My apologies. When doing the ACUP review, one of the exhibits was a square footage tracker that was used for identifying locations under the I-502 marijuana state. Looking at this, processing facilities for standalone, we have one other, or excuse me, for processing, we have I apologize, it does not break it between growing and processing. I will resend mine, but this spreadsheet includes that we had been looking at them under the 7,000 or 70,000 square foot cap, which has been corrected by Planning Manager Leviton.
I'm just trying to clarify whether on that appendix 3, under the maximum amount of space allotted for a standalone processing facility of 30,000 square foot, if we were to put that recommendation in, would that mean more could be built, or do we could recommend a lower threshold? That way, this is the last facility that goes in.
You could absolutely make that recommendation.
That would be something I would want to see recommended. Whoever wants to make a recommendation for the overall note, that's something I would like to see go in personally.
Thank you, Commissioner Welch. Does any other commissioner have any comments?
I do. I was hoping to hear from Commissioners Holt and Osland and Dewar because they've had such great feedback prior to our discussion this evening. My comments, I'll keep them brief. It's interesting the timing of all of this. When you read through the packet, which I keep getting reprimanded on, drawing everything together. Our meeting two months ago or 2 meetings ago, I was reprimanded on tying everything together. And you know what? I'm okay being reprimanded anywhere because I read my packet and the staff report ties us together. I also follow our city council and I watch them closely, especially in an election year. And they are being posed with an option to make this a corridor of a marijuana destination that I'm just not, I won't support. As somebody in the community, as newly annexed in, as a business owner, that's going to be something that I will not support. It's interesting that this packet was presented in such a way, no disrespect, but in such a way that I had to read it multiple times. I had to set it aside and come back to it because what are we actually voting on? We just heard this from Commissioner Welch. We've heard it from Chair Cronin. It's a difficult conversation for us, and we've been doing this. When it comes to the public that is focused elsewhere, this must be mind-numbing, and I appreciate those that showed up tonight to speak out. These invested people, these already invested people in our community that invested for a reason, I think are pretty courageous in taking time out of their day and away from their families to do that. So I appreciate them. A couple different things. The interpretation, we keep hearing about this word interpretation. So the interpretation of the city. A couple of meetings ago, we asked about the, I think it was Commissioner Dewar actually that said, is there any other city that has brought the barriers down to anything less than what was that 1,000-foot barrier? And only the city of Seattle was done in my notes, and that was 250. So we would be setting that up at 225. Were we to go to the third choice tonight, again, keeping in mind, and I'll just state right now, I think that we're getting the cart before the horse. But there's also some things in there that concern me in that as the crow flies. So we're doing things that are, as the crow flies, dependent on where a child could get to. You know, I have kids in my neighborhood that get to my yard, and they are within 250 feet of me. I also have a concern that there's a sunset date. So this can all be renegotiated in 2023. That's a pothole that I think that is might fly under the radar with all of this, with all of the other things that are going on. There's also, and I just mentioned this, annexations that are happening and that could happen in our future that might bring in future light industrial or general industrial where this might apply. So to make a determination where we're altering any kind of square footage when it comes to our canopy of pot production, grow, retail, whatever. I did appreciate that there was a caveat in there that said that there was no second retail, although 2023 there might be a second. That's concerning to me. So in my reviewing of this multiple times, I come down to one thing. And the only thing that I can agree to tonight is to change the 14.44097 to include the new wording on what is a home daycare versus what is a licensed daycare. And I'm bringing that wording up from memory because I've got a couple of different screens going on. That would be the only thing that I'm comfortable with right now. I think that this needs to be fully vetted. I am deeply concerned of where the city is going. I would ask that anybody on this call spend a little bit of time on YouTube, checking out the city council meetings of the last couple of months, heading back to March 16th. And that is where I will place my vote tonight and in the future when it comes to who leads our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Huxford. Any other commissioners have any comments before we make a motion?
I did have one. Sorry,
Oh.
Go on, Linda.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Basically, I don't feel comfortable moving forward with this. I would prefer to do another more information on the optional amendments to consider. So I'm not willing to approve and I'm not willing to deny. I'd rather continue and get some additional information. I agree with a lot of the stuff that Janice has been saying. So that's all.
And I guess I would have just a comment and a question. You know, we have thus far been presented with options, and I wonder if there's room within kind of our commission's bylaws or rules where we can ask staff to perhaps draft up some language that we would find acceptable. Because what I'm hearing is there's essentially three major things that we want to do. We want to maintain our high standard when it comes to the buffers. We want to close, this, we'll call it a loophole because that's effectively what it was. It was a piece of municipal code that was perhaps not descriptive enough. And then I really like what Commissioner Welch had to offer about total cap on square footage. And I wonder if that's something that we could discuss here and then direct staff to, instead of giving us a litany of options that they would like us to vote on, that perhaps we give them what we're thinking and that they could develop that for us.
We would prefer that.
Okay.
I can step in and just say that we can make a motion to approve attachment 2, because that just changes the definition. And we can add the section on the cap, and we can move that as a recommendation to the council, let them decide if that's what they want to do. Then that doesn't change. It makes the buffer still a long distance from everything. All it does is change the definition for that one facility, which is a state law. And then it also puts the cap on the facilities. And we can just then, everything, nothing expands at that point. You can't expand. There's a 70,000 foot buffer or a cap on production and processing for production. Then it puts the, let's say about 16 or 17,000 square foot on standalone processors. Then essentially, and we can take out the ending date. We can just say that's not there. That way it doesn't have to be reapproved. and then it's basically that that industry is in cap as it is with this new facility going in, then they're capped, they're done, and we just move along.
I'm in agreement with Commissioner Welch on that, as far as we can put in some of these better definitions and restrictions now. I wouldn't go for 200 feet though. There's no reason. The application has been pulled for that. So why wouldn't that be 1,000 feet? That's what we thought it was. So I would just have that caveat that it, put in the definition for the family daycare provider, put in the cap for the 30,000, doesn't need to have a sunset date, and 200 should be 1,000.
I think attachment 2 doesn't even have the 200 feet. I think that's part of attachment 3.
Right, that's the one I would go for.
So if we just go with attachment 2 and then add the other definition, then that's not the buffer doesn't change.
I think your point is the buffer's not necessary then because there's no more capacity.
That is correct
I
also.
can rephrase what I believe you're suggesting.
If I may, only because I again been watching the city council meetings, and the only reason that this even came back to us is because council member Peter Shagan spoke up back in March and brought it back to us. I'm concerned at I like where we're going, but I'm concerned at going too far and sending it straight to council without any public comment, because I think that there will be, there's an urgency somehow within council to get this done. And that bothers me at my core. So can we simply tonight approve that we change the RCW to include the new wording and carry this over? Or is there a way that we can approve tonight with recommendations to city staff that maybe in the next packet, there be some recommendations that include what Commissioner Welch and Commissioner Osland just spoke about?
Why do we need to go back to staff? We can just recommend it ourselves now. We don't have to go back to staff. We just had public opinion. The city council will have a public hearing on this. This has to go to a public hearing there on their end. If we just approve attachment 2, which is the definition change, and then also change the part in 97F3 for a cap, then it's done. What is there to go back and forth on? It's kind of a done deal. That what are we going to gain by coming back again? I don't see what we gain on that. We've capped it. The box is closed.
And I appreciate your comments, but us being advisory and city council being the end game on this, I'm really concerned about the decision making there. And I think that the more input, the better. And I don't want, no disrespect. I'm simply saying that there are a lot of twists and turns here just to get to tonight. We're a lot of twists and turns. And I think that there's, that it would not, the applicant who is on the call, maybe, yes, still, the applicant is in the clear, right? This project is moving forward. But for the greater good, for the overall wealth of our city, and I don't mean that financially, I mean it as our identity, I don't see the need to shove this through without having it be in the light of day. I'm not going to beleaguer it any more than I already have, but I swear we have spent more time in this planning commission since 2017 on marijuana than anything else. I am sick of it, and I am wishing that our city spent more time on any other industry than what we spent on with this industry. So forgive my outburst right there, but I would really like to move on. As much as you would, Commissioner Welch, I really do want to move on, but I also want to do it in the right way.
Thank you both for that. So I think this is the first time I've actually had one where we have different, potential differences of opinion. So I think what I'm going to do is make a motion, and then I'll go around and ask everybody how they feel about it. And then if it doesn't pass, we can continue it. I personally am in agreement with what Commissioner Davis said, because I do think that this cap and those things will be discussed in the next public hearing. And I know that, putting it to bed sounds good to everybody, but I do agree with Commissioner Huxford as well with regards to, it has to be pushed through right and in the light of day. So with that, I'd like to make a recommendation to the city council to approve. Oh, sorry, Russ. Sorry, Director Wright.
Interject some comments. So procedurally, if you go down the road tonight to make the motion and forward a recommendation to council on this specific change, that closes out this process. Then it would have to come back as an entirely new docketed work item for you. You would have closed your loop, made your recommendation. If you think there's further changes you would like to make, I would recommend that you that you continue this if you can't come to agreement tonight on what amendments you would like to make, such as the ones Commissioner Welch has suggested. But if you forward a recommendation, that becomes the next public hearing and the action for the council. If you want more deliberation on that and to discuss some of these other options more, then I would recommend you hold the hearing open. Again, not trying to be repetitive, but that you, if you have a series of amendments you would like tonight, that you encompass those in your motion. If you think you need another couple of weeks to digest those, or if you do want to redirect it to staff, that is an option. But procedurally, I just want to make sure that you're being cautious on the steps that you take, that as the commission, you're taking the action that you're prepared to take.
I appreciate that. And thank you also, Commissioner Welch. Now I more understand what you were saying. Well, in that case, so in that case, I guess then I will make a motion to, sorry, now I lost my paper. But I would make a motion to continue this discussion and continue the public hearing to May 19th, so we can so this Planning Commission can further discuss those amendments from attachment 3 in further detail, rather than just, kind of make a blind recommendation right now, as I feel like some of this conversation was, more about the overall process than, about some of the specifics. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to continue this discussion through a public hearing, or continue to keep the public hearing open to May 19th.
I would like to second that.
Before we vote, may I make a couple, Linda, I'm sorry, Commissioner Holt, I'm sorry. May I make ask a couple questions?
Please.
So the comments that were made tonight, will they be carried over until May 19th?
Yeah.
Should. They're part of the record.
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Do we have to reopen the public hearing because we closed the public hearing? Do we have to reopen it and keep it open? Yeah. Do we want to reopen then also public comment, or just reopen the public hearing? Reopen the public comments, then people can email or send stuff to the city during this time.
Yep. That's the commission's prerogative, whichever way they'd like.
I make a motion to reopen the public hearing.
With public, or without public comment?
Without public comment.
Seconded.
Wait, without public comment, so the public can't send emails during this 2-week period and comment on what we're talking about? We want it with public comment, don't we? Is that what you said, Director Wright?
I suggested that to receive additional public comment and to even continue, you would have to reopen the public hearing. Then you've had conversation amongst yourselves whether or not you would want public comment or not. So
Then I rescind my motion. I rescind my motion. Sorry. I rescind my motion.
Would you like to make another one, Commissioner Huxford, with the addition? Or I guess I'd like to reopen the public comment with, or sorry, reopen the public hearing with additional public comment until May 19th for us to further discuss the additional amendments related to the marijuana facilities.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
I have a nay. I'm a nay vote.
So yeah, with that, actually, let's go around just so we make sure we have it correct. Commissioner Huxford,
Yes.
Commissioner Welch,
No.
Commissioner Davis,
Yes.
Commissioner Osland,
Yes.
Commissioner Doer,
Yes.
Commissioner Holt,
Yes.
and then Commissioner Cronin. I also vote yes. So thank you for all that discussion. That was a lot of good input, and I appreciate all the guests and everybody that came in as well.
Commissioner
with
Cronin,
yes.
may I ask
Sorry.
a couple of questions for staff's benefit to make sure we're bringing you back what you would like at the next meeting? And I'll invite Dave to help me recap what we've heard. So there's been a lot of discussion on, you definitely want to move forward with the new definitions. You would like to include an ultimate cap on standalone production. You would like to not have a sunset clause. And I don't think I've heard consensus on what a buffer should or should not be.
Well, for me personally, I would retain the 1,000-foot in all instances.
Okay.
So just to clarify that, that's maintain the 1,000-foot. If we were to implement a new buffer on family daycare providers, the 1,000 feet would apply to all three types of marijuana businesses: processors, producers, and retailers.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, and so what we can do is just I don't create the massive confusion that I did this time, especially without labeling the attachments. We can provide just one attachment. We would add in under 1444-097E 4, we would add in that applies to family daycare providers, as well as the other protected uses. Under F, we would include an F5 that would establish if it's 16,000 square feet, if that was the consensus, that's where we would establish that cap on marijuana processing facilities. And we would not reduce that 1,000-foot standard buffer on family daycare providers for any types of marijuana businesses. And we would allow for public comment on that on May 19th.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting us clarify.
Thank you for helping me when I'm drowning over here sometimes. All right, with that, we're done with the discussion or with the public hearing. So now I'm going to open it up to the first and only discussion item on a briefing on lot status determination. And I'm going to hand it over to Associate Planner Gassaway.
Thank you, Commissioner Cronin. I will try to make this brief so that we can all have a restful evening. Staff provided an introduction to the lot status code amendment on March 3rd. This is our second time providing the draft code amendment, first time April 21st, your last meeting. The commission asked us to bring this back after hearing feedback from our legal team, which we have, and the team has provided comment in the draft that was provided in your packet. The draft amendment is relies heavily on the Attorney General's opinion and state case law, keeping in mind the specifics of the RCW in Chapter 5817, but also taking into effect the distinctions between alternative options for a lot status determination and traditional methods of subdivision. Our amendment as written includes application criteria, list of requirements for submittal material, decision criteria, and methods for appeal, including standard methods for lot status determination and alternatives for options such as when lots were divided through tax segregation or other means through deed and dedication. I open up this to the commission. I would love to hear your input. And given that this is our second time presenting this, if the commissioners don't have any substantive comment, staff would recommend we move this to a public hearing at the next available time.
Thank you, Planner Gasaway. Do any commissioner have any comments for the planner? And I have a couple, but give me a second.
I believe this is the subject, one of the subjects we actually pushed to hear from Commissioner Cronin about before we moved to public hearing. So I think we're really kind of waiting to hear what you have to say on this subject more than we had a discussion about it last time. So but we wanted to hear your professional opinion on this matter.
Yeah. So when I read through it, I don't really see anything. I guess my one question is none of the dates. I've had a couple issues, or not issues, but I understand why the city is doing this. I think it is important. There's a lot of lots that were created and are just tax parcels, and I've actually bought a lot before and found out I couldn't build on it, which ended up working out fine. But you can see how there's some ambiguity sometimes, which can lead to litigation and a lot of other stuff. So I guess my only question would be that this is just defining a lot. None of your no balls are being moved as far as dates. Like I see that 1969 date from the tax parcel. I'm pretty sure that's the same. So I guess, can you confirm that there's no changes being made to allow necessarily more lots? And I know that's kind of a loaded question, but there's no hardline dates or anything like that being changed. It's more to clean up the code to specify what a legal lot status and to get the for lot status determination.
So to clarify, Commissioner Cronin, the city does not currently have a lot status determination code. All of our lot status determinations have been through an administrative policy that the city has been using for the past 20 some, even longer. And so through this code amendment, we're trying to take that administrative policy and put it into code that makes it accessible to the public and easier for staff to provide quick and easy and efficient means of providing a lot status determination to those who request one and or properties that need one.
And the foundation of the dates, those are specific to when different statutory or other codes were adopted at the state level. And we followed those. And then the 1970 date would be the city's subdivision date. But other than that, yeah, we are trying to reflect the dates in state law for enactment of subdivisions, both territorial and modern subdivision actions.
Thank you. Yeah, I think to me this looks very similar. I must have looked at it through Snohomish County or from where, but as far as my input on it, I support it. I think it's a good idea, and along the lines of code cleanup and a more efficient code for the city. So I would recommend pushing this on to a public hearing.
Fantastic. I will give it to the commission to further discuss or make a motion.
Are there any other commissioners that have any other input, or is this, if what Commissioner Welch is, I will make the motion. All right, well, thank you. So I'd like to make a motion to push forward the proposed lot status code amendments to push it towards a public hearing. Can I have a second?
Second,
All those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. So Associate Planner Gastaway, do you have what you need as far as the lot status determination?
Yes, staff will work to schedule a public hearing at the earliest convenience.
Thank you very much. All right, so now we're on to the commissioners' reports. Commissioner Huxford.
I'm fully vaccinated as of 1:50 today. Second shot in my arm.
Congratulations.
Join me. Everybody join me. No, we're just happy to be done talking about it in our household. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful.
Commissioner Welch.
The only comment I'll make is I am very thankful for our city and our small businesses that the governor chose not to revert us back to phase 2 and put further stress on the people who work so hard on these businesses and the employees who we all know that in the service industry, if you've ever worked in it, you make your money by tips is your big thing. If there's no one in your restaurant, you're not making tips. So I'm glad that that didn't happen and we can keep moving forward with our businesses and all the entrepreneurs in this city. Thank you.
Commissioner Davis.
Nothing for me tonight. Thank you.
Commissioner Osland.
No report. Thanks.
Commissioner Doer.
No report tonight. Thanks.
Commissioner Holt.
Well, Janice, I will be joining you as fully vaccinated on the 18th of May. I've had the first shot. I'm getting my second.
Congratulations. And no report from me as well. I do second Commissioner Welch's sentiment. I do feel good for I have tenants and people that have been struggling, and I know that if that would have been, kind of the third kick to them, they I don't know how they would have stayed positive and all that stuff. So, hopefully we're on our way out of this at some point. And thank you to the city. I know that we come at you hard sometimes, and I want you to know we really do appreciate your guys' hard work. And it's never, it's never anything personal or anything like that. It's just, sometimes questions on all sides need to be asked. So I appreciate all your hard work and diligence on it. And with that, on to the planning director's report. On to Director Wright.
I don't have any specific reports for the commission tonight, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any over the last week.
It's open for any commissioners.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Hearing nothing, that concludes the planning commission meeting for May 5th, 2021.
Sure.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Oh my God.